Hi, my name's Mike Fisher from the British Association of Anger Management, and I'm very excited to be introducing you to 20 tips which is going to help you hopefully to manage your anger far more effectively. So the first tip is taking time out. Now, what I want to be very clear about is when I talk about taking time out, I'm not just talking about leaving a situation where you're in conflict with somebody, going to regroup and then coming back and then attacking them. The idea of taking time out is to begin the process of introspecting and reflecting and trying to get a sense of what's going on for you. One of the first rules of anger management is to stop, think, take a look at the big picture. So the idea of taking time out is to go away, to start the process of trying to understand of what is going on here. What's your part in the situation? What might be the other person's part in the situation? And as you start to reflect and explore the dynamic within the context of the situation, it actually helps you to make more sense of it, and it helps you in the long run to manage your anger more effectively. Number 2 is always start by communicating how you feel. So the challenge here is to be able to say to the other person that you feel angry, or you feel sad, or you feel scared, or you feel hurt, or you feel ashamed. Because the idea here is that if you start by suggesting or saying to the other person, you always, you never, why don't you, you should, and one more thing, means that they experience you as shaming and blaming them. And of course, if that is the case, they're going to come out of their corner and do what they can to actually shame and blame and attack you back. So the challenge is to be able to say, I feel angry because you don't listen to me, or I feel angry with you because you're not taking me seriously, or I feel angry with you because actually, under the circumstances, I'm experiencing you as really unfair. And so the challenge is that when you can begin to communicate from the perspective or the position of I feel, by expressing your feelings as opposed to shaming and blaming, that in itself can be rather transformative. So instead of saying, why are you not listening to me? You should listen to me. You never listen to me. You always interrupt me, is an opportunity to actually put the other person on the back foot and then expect them to attack you back. But if you communicate the I feel, from that perspective, is going to be profoundly, profoundly transformative. The next tip is to be assertive, as opposed to being what we call passive aggressive or active aggressive. So when I mean being assertive, it's very important for you to be able to communicate very clearly what your needs are. And so what I mean by that is very simply being able to express what you need. So a need looks something like this. I need you to listen to me. I need you to respect me. I need you to value me. I need you to take me seriously. I need you to see me. I need you to understand me. I need you to remain silent until I'm finished speaking. And that's what I mean by actually communicating and expressing your needs. So the idea of being assertive is a way of communicating without shaming or blaming the other person, without being what we call passive aggressive, as I've said before, or active aggressive. And by being passive aggressive, you express sarcasm, you express cynicism, you actually shame and blame the other person, you undermine them or demoralize them or dismiss them or demean them in some way or another. And of course, if you're acting in an active aggressive way, you're no longer communicating and expressing your feelings in the most effective and potentially healing way. It's about screaming and shouting. It's about hurling abuse. It's about being very, very disrespectful. It's about evoking fear in the other person in order to control them. So the idea here is not to behave in a passive-aggressive way or an active-aggressive way, but in an assertive way by being very clear about what your boundaries are and what you need right now in that moment. The fourth point is in the situation that you experience yourself with high levels of anger or aggression, is to see if you can bring into your awareness the consequences of the situation. Because have you ever noticed how in that moment You are angry or being aggressive towards somebody, but you're not taking into consideration the consequences. In fact, you're probably saying, damn, or stuff the consequences. I'll deal with the consequences later. And the challenge is if you can actually catch yourself and start to reflect and consider what those consequences are. And you probably know this anyway, that actually often the consequences are worse than the situation or the event itself. So by taking in or bringing into your awareness what some of those consequences might be, it might be able to help you to catch that moment and see if you can manage it very differently. Number 5 is about reaching out for support. So many of us who experience high levels of anger, of course, experience high levels of immeasurable stress. And so the idea is if you have somebody that you can communicate with, if you can talk to about what's going on for you in your life, and you can share some of the challenges that you're faced with, if you can share some of the distress that you're experiencing, and get a friendly word or some friendly advice or some insight into your own behavior, that can be profoundly transformative. And I often on our program suggest you have to have anger buddies. You have to enroll people into the process because you need all the support you can get in order to manage your anger. Number 6, your body will always tell you when you're angry and when you are stressed. And the idea is to notice what's going on in your body so that you can use it as a resource. So when you start to notice these really uncomfortable feelings in your body, it might be in that moment is to actually stop. This is all part of the first rule. Stop, think, take a look at the big picture. And the idea is to actually stop and then to begin to notice what is actually happening in your body. Notice what you might be feeling in your body and where you're feeling it. It might be a combination of anger and stress. It might just be stress, or of course it might be anger. And you can use that as a resource, as a way of being able to begin to start making sense of what might be going on for you, and also how you might be able to manage a situation that you find yourself in, which is, of course, very distressing. The next one is one that I love, number 7. The idea is when you notice that this anger comes up in you, we talk about the 5-minute rule. And the suggestion here is if it doesn't matter in 5 minutes, let it go. Let me repeat that. If it doesn't matter in 5 minutes, let it go. Drop it. If it's going to matter after 5 minutes, then you're going to have to say something or take some kind of action. So what I'm suggesting, if it keeps knocking at your door after 5 minutes, you're going to have to consider a strategy. You're going to have to think about how you're going to manage this situation. It's about finding the courage, it's about identifying support, and it's about finding a way to actually deal with the situation that you find very distressing. On our anger management programs, we introduce you to a clearing process, what we call a conflict resolution piece. And the idea is to actually do clearings, clearing the air with the other person. And it's in a very structured way where nobody has to be shamed or blamed, no one has to feel or be hurt. It's about very clear, direct communication, which in fact is part of being assertive. One of the things that I suggest on the programs that we deliver on is to take the word should and delete it from your hard drive. That word should, when you impose a should on another person, you're assuming that they accept your value system, that they accept your belief system, they accept your morals. They have their own shoulds. You have your shoulds. And what happens is when we get caught up in our shoulds, it creates conflict. I impose a should on you, you impose a should on me. And shoulds are very limiting, shoulds are very controlling, shoulds are very shaming. And the idea is that if you think about it, you've got many shoulds in your own head which don't even belong to you. You've inherited those shoulds. And so the idea is to start to challenge your own shoulds, start to challenge the other person's shoulds, and see if you can find a way of deleting that should word or the ought to word out of your vocab. You'll find even that simple gesture can make a huge amount of difference in the way that we do conflict. Number 11 is to listen. Now, I use a very simple acronym, L-O-V-E. L is if you're not listening, it means you're not learning. O is for objectivity. That's all part of stop, think, take a look at the big picture. V is for verifying, asking questions, asking clarifying questions in order to make sense of what in fact is going on. As you know, most of the conflict that we get into has all to do with miscommunication, assumptions, expectations, and of course shoulds. So the idea is, if we use the L, listen, the O for objectivity, the V for verifying and clarifying, and the E for empathizing, that can make a huge difference in the way that we listen to each other. So what happens is that I give you the floor, you share everything that you need to share, I make sure that I understand what it is that you're saying, clarify what it is that you're saying, or verify what it is that you're saying, and of course, when I'm finished, you take the floor and you share whatever you need to share with me. The challenge here is not to interrupt each other. And as you already know, when you're in an angry state, that's when we tend to stop listening and start attacking or arguing. Number 12 is all about shadow projections, what we project onto each other. So for example, think about a very simple situation where I judge you or criticize you for being lazy, or for being unpractical, or for being disrespectful, or for being unkind and uncaring. And just think about what you project or what you impose on the other. Do you do any of those things? Can you be unkind and uncaring? Can you be disrespectful? Can you be controlling? And so the idea is, can you be lazy? So the idea is, if you recognize that you're criticizing the other person or you're judging the other person, it might be that it's saying a hell of a lot about you than it is about the other person. So what I'd like you to do, if you are interested in understanding more about shadow projections, is you can look that up in my book, Beating Anger, or you can go online and look under the subject called shadow projections. You'll find a lot about shadow and shadow projections. It's a term that was developed by a chap by the name of Dr. Carl Jung, who spoke about shadow, spoke about projections, and it's a very important part of helping you to manage your anger, helping you to identify what you project onto others. It's all part of the first rule of anger management: stop, think, take a look at the big picture. Number 14 is begin the process of identifying what your emotional needs are. I call them primary needs. Abraham Maslow talks about ego needs. The idea of identifying your emotional needs and your primary needs, which are directly related to who you are in the world and directly related to self-esteem, which of course at this point I'm not going to be able to go into, but I want to give you examples of that. An emotional need, as I said before earlier on, is to be valued and appreciated and respected and understood and cared for, and to feel significant and to feel loved, to be seen, to be heard, to be trusted, to feel that when you want to cuddle or you want somebody to hold you, you can ask for it, to feel like you're taken seriously, to feel like you're significant. And of course, most of the conflict that we get into is all about not having our primary and emotional needs met. And so if you decide at some point to do one of our programs, you'll actually recognize that virtually all of your anger comes from that particular source, which we talk about sources of anger. So when you're not having your primary emotional needs met, that is a very clear trigger for anger. I always say this at the beginning of most of my programs. You've got to do two things here. One is you've got to sit in the discomfort of your feelings, and secondly, you've got to delay gratification. So let me open that up. The idea of sitting in the discomfort of your feelings is that when your anger gets triggered, the challenge is, can you sit in your anger? Can you sit in the discomfort of that feeling? Often what you'll find is that it's very difficult for certain people to be able to do that. And when they actually find it impossible, that's of course the point when they act out in anger. But that's not just about anger. It's about sadness. It's about hurt. It's about fear. It's about shame. So the idea is that if you can actually train yourself to sit in the discomfort of these feelings, in your sadness and your hurt and your anger and your shame and your fear, it's going to help you to delay gratification and look at the big picture and find a way of communicating those feelings and those emotions and those thoughts and those anxieties and fears in such a way that the other person will be able to understand you. The other person will be receptive to what's going on for you. But as you already know, what we tend to do, we kind of shoot from the hip and then we speak later. Or we shoot from the hip and we ask questions later. And at that point, it's very difficult for the other person to be receptive to what it is that you have to say. So let me just remind you, the challenge here is to sit in the discomfort of your own feelings and, of course, delay gratification. For people who have anger management problems, sitting in the discomfort of their feelings, delaying gratification is virtually impossible, because all they want at the point that their anger is triggered is blood, and they want to hurt the other person. Be authentic and be assertive. What is it that I'm suggesting here? Being authentic is about being real. Being assertive is being able to communicate your thoughts and feelings in such a way that the other person is able to hear you. So you're not coming across as attacking. You're not coming across as patronizing or dismissive. You're not coming across as if you are in a position of superiority or coming from a position of false entitlement. So the idea is that being authentic is about communicating your feelings, about communicating your thoughts without shame or blame. It's about being as real as you possibly can in that situation without abusing the other person. It's all about how you can communicate assertively without diminishing the other person through being patronizing, or what we call passive aggressive, or becoming active aggressive by screaming and shouting, by eyeballing, by finger pointing, by making these threatening and condescending remarks. Number 17 is fairly difficult. Now, on our anger management programs, we talk about moving away from oppositional thinking, moving away from duality, meaning moving away from right and wrong and good and bad and my fault and your fault and you should have done this and I should have done that. And what I mean by that is thinking in opposites. So I take up a position, I'm right, you wrong, shut up. And when that happens, you take up a position, you're right, I'm wrong, shut up. So it's about moving away from duality. And I talk about zero duality. I talk about being able to get to a point where we can do two things. One, the second rule of anger management, it's okay to have a different opinion. Opinions are not facts. They're just opinions. And the other idea is to be able to be in a position to agree to disagree, so that we don't have to get into this right and wrong, take up a position, go to war. And of course, this is very difficult to do. And on our programs, we do a lot of work around getting people to move from this either or thinking, this oppositional thinking, to both and thinking, which is zero duality thinking, moving away from getting into battles and unnecessary conflict because we take up these positions and I make you wrong and you make me wrong, we go to war. Number 18 is be empathetic. Now, I know when I get angry, historically, I would demonize the other person. I would turn them into the enemy, and I have just one responsibility, is to take them out, take them down, do what I can to diminish them and take up a position of moral superiority. I'm right, you're wrong. So the idea is when I'm angry, being empathetic is virtually impossible. And I've had to, over many, many years, train myself to see what might be going on for the other person by being able to put myself in their shoes and being able to empathize with what's going on for them and see if I can be compassionate to whatever it is that they're experiencing. And I'm not suggesting this is easy. I think this is probably one of the hardest things to do, because being empathetic and compassionate when I'm angry with somebody is virtually impossible. So good luck. Number 19. The idea is to agree to disagree. Now, earlier on, I did talk about agreeing to disagree. I'm telling you that if you want to move away from combat or conflict in your life, you're going to have to, at different points, when you find that you're getting into that oppositional thinking, you're going to have to train yourself to agree to disagree. And of course, the more you say that to the other person, there's nothing to push against, because you're actually not getting involved in conflict. You're just simply saying, it's okay to have a different opinion and let's agree to disagree. This is not about being right. This is not about being wrong. This is not about taking a position. This is about just being able to accept that you have a view and I have a view. And it's about how do we validate? How do we come to terms that each of us have very, very different experiences? And on our programs, we actually look at that in a lot of detail. Finally, number 20 is resolve conflict in a structured way. It's very difficult to resolve conflict in an unstructured way. It's difficult to resolve conflict when we're interrupting each other, when we're imposing our shoulds on each other, when we're actually taking up this position of oppositional thinking and getting caught up in that right and wrong and that good and that bad thing. To be able to find ways of being empathetic. It's about stop, think, take a look at the big picture. It's about reaching out for support from an anger buddy. It's about reminding yourself that it's okay to have a different opinion. It's important to listen. So the idea is that you need to find ways to resolve conflict in a structured way. And on our programs, that's just what we do. We give you a beautiful structure with 5 points that you need to follow. And on the basis of that, if you can train yourself to do that and you can train somebody else to do that, that in itself could be profoundly, profoundly transformative. I hope that you like the 20 points. If you want to know more about what it is that we do, who it is that we are, it's www.angermanage.co.uk. You can also read my books. The one book is called Beating Anger, and most of what I'm sharing now you'll find in Beating Anger. My second book is called Mindfulness and the Art of Managing Anger, How to Clear the Red Mists. Thank you for listening. I hope that you'll share this video with friends and family.